We speak now on the effect of alcohol on society and the need for robust and evolving policies. We're joined now by Maurice Smithers of the South African Alcohol Policy Alliance. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. Just listening in to a heartbroken parent who says, irrespective of 21 young lives being taken, underage drinking still continues in that part of the province, and of course perhaps reflective of what happens nationally, perhaps even globally. Talk to us a little bit, just reacting to what the parents are feeling and the big question on why the continuation of underage drinking even after such a deadly and devastating tragedy.
Thank you very much, Mpho. Thanks for having me. Just to clear the record, I'm not with SAPA anymore. I work independently as an alcohol harm reduction activist. I was actually in contact with Enyobeni today, and we also had a webinar discussing this issue together with the Central Drug Authority, the South African Human Rights Commission, and a number of civil society organizations. And what came through in that webinar and from Enyobeni is just the absolute desperation that people are feeling about the fact that we are in the situation that we're in, I think everybody is completely shocked that after the death of 21 young people, we still don't have any answers. The inquest has dragged on and on and on. Completely unnecessarily in our view. The way that case was handled, as Enyobeni said, was really shocking as well, because the people got charged for serving alcohol to one person, one underage person. So all of this just gives, I think, everyone a sense that the lives of those 21 children don't matter, but also more generally that the lives of everybody don't matter. And I think the point you make, I need to emphasize that it's not just in South Africa, it's globally. And it's to do with the fact that alcohol, the way in which alcohol is sold, the way in which it's managed, is done much more to serve the economic interests of the liquor industry than it is to protect ordinary people from the harm that can be caused by it. And we really do need to see a change in that very, very urgently, especially in South Africa.
Yeah. What the South African Human Rights Commission's probe showed was that government's failure to ensure compliance by practitioners to laws such as selling alcohol to underage children, children's rights and measures aimed at curbing alcohol abuse are to blame for this tragedy that resulted in the deaths of 21 young people. What would you say, I mean, are some of the leading causes around the lapses in regulation or perhaps the lack of implementation?
Well, I think there's a couple of issues. I mean, I think one is just a problem of governments and the lack of, across government, as we've seen, a lack of what we generally call service delivery, because this is service delivery as well. But it's a lack of accountability from the liquor board itself, from the SAPS, from the municipality, from national government as well. Just a lack of people who are in government to carry out certain functions, not taking responsibility for what they are supposed to do, what the law says they're supposed to do, what the Constitution says they're supposed to do. And then when something happens, trying to shift the blame. And we saw that happen with Enyobeni, where we had the liquor board blaming the municipality blaming the liquor board, and everybody trying to put the blame somewhere else. And in fact, what was most shocking is the way in which so many people were trying to blame the parents and even the children for the situation. Now, of course, there's a certain level of accountability with the parents and the children, but you can't see the behavior of parents and children. You have to see it in the context of what is happening in society. And if you have a situation where I did some focus groups recently with young people in 4 different provinces, and there was an interesting phrase that came out from one young person, and he said that the problem is that taverns control communities, and communities should be controlling taverns.
Yeah.
And that is the situation. We have a situation where taverns and the people who are drinking in them are allowed to run riot, to behave in whichever way they want to, whatever the consequences are for the community around them. And this is right across the country. And the only way you can stop that is by having effective legislation, accountable government, and enforcement of that legislation, so that an environment is created in which tavern owners, and we're not saying that they shouldn't be able to operate, but that they know that they have to operate within the law, otherwise they will face serious consequences, including being shut down and not allowed to operate in the future.
Yeah.
And unless that changes, I don't see how anything can change.
As you make mention of that focus group talking about taverns controlling communities as opposed to the ideal situation, which would be the other way around, what would you say are some of the factors now driving adolescent alcohol consumption? Because we do know that, globally, alcohol is a leading risk for or factor or for death and disability among adolescents in the 15 to 19-year bracket, and South Africa being no exception, because 1/3 of the South African population is actually under the age of 18. What's your take on that, and just really looking at the driving factors?
Well, they're the general driving factors that apply across the world, and that is advertising, peer pressure, the normalization of alcohol, easy access to alcohol, cheap alcohol. So all of those factors create an environment in which young people are enticed or groomed into wanting to drink alcohol. Now, the alcohol industry, of course, says they're not trying to do that, but of course they are, because if you think about it, they have a market. And some people, who are drinkers, either as they get older stop drinking or they die. How is the industry going to replace those people, those customers, if they don't target young people? So quite clearly, they are targeting young people. They do want young people to become their new market. So that's the one big problem, and that's something that government has to intervene. We're not knocking the liquor industry for wanting to make profit. That's what they're there for. But they cannot make their profit at the expense of the health and safety and dignity and well-being of society. So therefore, government's got to control them. It's as simple as that. But in South Africa, though, unfortunately, and this is something that we came across in our focus groups, the situation is made even worse by the rampant unemployment amongst young people, the lack of recreational facilities and other activities they can engage in their communities. In many communities across the country, rural and urban, the only real activity, social gathering place, is the liquor outlet. And so, for young people, that's where they go. And there's all kinds of challenges, including around abuse of women that take place. And alcohol becomes also a way of dealing with their reality, with the sort of desperation of their situation, knowing that, there's no chance in the immediate future of them getting any employment or their lives changing or improving in any kind of way. So it's a vicious cycle that's happening, which is just then fed, as I said, by advertising, peer pressure, normalization, but also by the fact that government is not doing enough to try and address the situation and help young people to not get locked into that cycle of use of alcohol in a very
and more so, if you'll allow me, Maurice, more so with, government attempting to address these problems associated with underage drinking. We do know that legislation in some areas is yet to be enacted by Parliament, which really speaks to a lot of questions around why is it taking so long, and why not put a lot more emphasis to ensure that it is enacted by Parliament?
No, you're making a very good point. And, you know, we went through a very good period from 2010 to 2017 when there were very strong moves by government to try and introduce good legislation. But unfortunately, since 2017, for reasons I won't go into now, government decided that they were going to put a hold on this. And right throughout COVID, even though COVID made it very clear that we had a problem, that legislation wasn't passed, and since then it hasn't been passed. In fact, the current, or just the recent Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, who took office in 2019, as far as I can see, didn't say a single thing publicly in the entire 5 years that he was in government. So, there's clearly is a lack of political will to deal with it. But there's another problem which I want to raise, and I think this really points to what I believe is the thing that needs to be done. You know, the Liquor Amendment Bill, one of the things we've heard from the Department of Trade and Industry, and was said in the webinar today as well, is there is a problem that the Liquor Amendment Bill, as it stands, may in fact be, may not pass constitutional muster. Now, the reason for that is that the Constitution says that liquor licensing, retail liquor licensing, is an exclusive provincial responsibility. So even though we have a national alcohol problem, we don't have a national alcohol solution, because the national government is limited in what it can do. So provinces make their own laws, and they don't have to be uniform. They can do them the way they want, and they're not accountable to anybody else. And added to that, the Constitution also gives certain rights to municipalities, and we've seen how those powers sometimes overlap with provinces. So what I believe is actually needed in order to deal with this thing once and for all is a constitutional amendment, which is that the law changes to say that all liquor legislation must be an exclusive national responsibility, ideally not driven by the Department of Trade and Industry, because their interest is economic development, not alleviating social harm. So it should rather go to social development or health. And then provinces can administer that law. They can't change the law. They can't adjust the law, and they can maybe have earlier closing hours, perhaps, but not later closing hours. And in that way, we can have a national plan implemented uniformly across the country, in every province, in every district, in every municipality, in every community. And in addition, we need to build into that legislation empowering mechanisms for communities to have a material say over what is happening in their neighborhoods. Right now,
thank you so much, Maurice. Unfortunately, that's pretty much the time we have for you, but thank you for your time and your contribution to this discussion. Maurice Smithers, alcohol harm reduction activist, speaking there to some of the solutions around underage drinking and what needs to happen as we take stock of the 21 young lives lost in Enyobeni 2 years ago.